Hi, this is Glenn Kaiser with the Dolby Institute, and welcome to our special Oscar Contenders podcast. Today's episode is featuring Ford versus Ferrari, and we're going to kick off with a great conversation that I had a couple months ago with the post-production sound team on the film. So you're going to hear from Don Sylvester, Paul Massey, and Dave Giammarco about the really extraordinary work done on the post-production side of Ford versus Ferrari. And then stick around for the special second part of the conversation where we talk with production sound mixer Steve Morrow. Enjoy it. Paul, I haven't seen you since you won your Oscar for Bohemian Rhapsody. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks. It was a joy to work on, definitely.
Yeah, we had a couple of fun conversations about that one,
yes.
Didn't we? Not every, like I said, people haven't seen this movie yet. I feel very fortunate because I got to see it at the Telluride Film Festival, which was actually the first time that anybody saw the movie. And it's I can tell you, you're in for a really fun experience when you watch this movie because it's just a great, kind of almost like an old-fashioned, just really entertaining movie with great characters. And of course, the thing that you can always expect from a movie from James Mangold is just impeccable craftsmanship. All the departments in this movie are working at the top of their game. And the sound department is obviously no exception. Now, you guys have had a pretty good run with James. I think you guys have worked with him ever since it started with Walk the Line, right? Back in like 2005?
Yeah, I actually first met Jim in this room. He was mixing Girl Interrupted in the late 90s. And I did a little bit of work on that, but I wasn't the main mixer. And then moved to Fox, and I've done 6 films with Jim now, starting with Walk the Line. And we've all worked with him before.
Me too. Yeah. I met him in 2005 with Walk the Line. That was my first experience. He's a pretty great guy to hitch your wagon to. Mm-hmm. He knows what he wants. And it's been a great experience.
To me, it's really exciting to witness a long-term collaboration between a director and a sound team. And I'm wondering if you guys can just talk a little bit about how that work goes with Jim. How much what kind of a presence does he have on the mixing stage? Is he one of those directors that's on the mix all day, every day, or does he just come in for playbacks and say, "Oh, you guys did a great job, thanks"?
Neither. So Jim's a delight to work with. He I mix the dialogue and music, so he gives me an awful lot of latitude in experimenting with music presentations to him. And I feel like you can do a very nice sort of sparring back and forth with him in presenting ideas and having his input. And I always feel like at the end of a project with Jim, we've come up with something that neither one of us would have done on our own, but that he, collaboratively has taken us to another level. And he doesn't sit there and go through every single little detail with you. He'll actually go crazy if he does that. He'll pace up and down, and every time you hit play, he'll be, but the door's too big. No, the car's too oh no, and you have to turn around.
You're like, I am only working on one thing at a time.
I know. I have to say, Jim, the amount of times I've said to him, please, it's going to take me like 5 passes to get close to where you want. Just, and he's like, do you want me to leave? Yes, leave. But in a nice way. And he comes back and it likes to see an overall presentation. And then we can take it to the next level. It's really a joy to work with.
Don and David, can you talk a little bit about how you guys collaborate and work together? Because Don, you're the sound supervisor. Dave, you are the sound designer and you mix the effects with Paul, right? So how do you guys kind of divvy things up between you?
Well, I'm embedded in the picture department. I think that's pretty common now. What that means is I'm in the room a lot when Jim is making observations and notes, and if I'm not, I'm only a shout away, which is literally what happens. Don! And I come running, and he goes, "Here's my note. Do this, do that, do this, do this, that. Thanks." And then I leave. So I have a very thick notebook of tiny little notes that I take 17 times a day. And so I never miss anything because I'm always there. It's great. And he'll forget the note, but I won't. So that's one of the great things about working so close to him. And then also, he's kind of like, what he lets me do or makes me do is he wants to view a scene that's completely filled out with sound, music, right from the very start, like the very first cut of the scene, it's going to have music and cars and sound effects and then he'll give the notes. So I have to sort of pre-plan the roadmap of where we're going to go, and then he'll tell me, you're going the wrong way, you're going the right way. But that's how he gives notes. He can't listen to anything unless it's completely done, as if it's a tiny mix, a tiny final, really. And that's his pattern. He wants to think of it as a movie from from the very inception of the scene. He wants a movie, and if it doesn't qualify as a good movie yet, at least he'll have the chance to start giving notes from the very beginning. And then Dave, you can talk.
Well, Don started very early on, and then Jay Wilkinson came on. He was also sound designing, and the two of them did a lot of initial work and like getting things to the picture editors. And for Jim, I came on a bit later, and then it was preparing these scenes that Don's talking about, getting things cut ready, get them over to picture, and then build the track in their Avid with what we had. Get to a temp dub stage when we had a length of quite a bit of time to work with Jim and really kind of hone where this was going to go. And then we just built upon that until we got to the final mix and then started pre-dubs and finals.
Yeah, but we made about 100 finals in between.
Well, I wanted to ask about can you kind of walk us through sort of what the mixing process was on the show? You mentioned temp mixes, were there test screenings, typical kind of test screenings? How many temps did you do, and then what was the process and sort of timeline around the pre-dubs and the final?
I think we did one temp in February and another in March, and then so the first one was the big one, and then I think we started pre-dubbing mid-April. And so it was just building on the track. The first temp was quite strong, and then we built upon that for final. And so when we started pre-dubbing, it was, we were pretty close. We were well built, but he hadn't heard what we brought yet, what more we've added. So that was getting him in early on the pre-dub stage, have him walk in and hear what we'd done. I finished the first reel, and we showed him, brought him in, and played him some clips from reel one.
Just the sound effects.
Sound effects with dialogue, temp dialogue and temp music. But he heard it, and he loved it, and we knew we were off and running and going the right way. So it was pretty exciting for us.
In the beginning, Jim was obsessed with the length of the film. He thought it was too long. And so every day was like, what can we cut? What can we cut? What we cut? And we were like, well, this is pretty important, and that's pretty important. And so our first test screening, they asked the audience how, it's too long, right? And they went, no. And he was like, got it. Nothing's coming out.
Yeah, I mean, the movie is what, 2.5, 240?
No.
No?
212, is it?
Oh, 212.
No, it's in the...
Is it?
Yeah, it's around there.
Okay, I thought it was about 2.5, but
I think you're right.
I saw that I could have taken another hour. I thought it was just I was that invested in the characters, and it's great stuff.
That's been I think the audience reaction all the way through. It seems a bit formidable to go in and watch a 2.5 hour movie, but people just want more, which is great.
Would y'all like to see a scene? Yeah. The first clip that we have is from it's the Willow Springs Raceway scene from 1963. So the two main characters in the film are Ken Miles and Carol Shelby, who are played by Christian Bale and Matt Damon. So this is a scene. Probably is this from reel one? It's from early in the film, and we're kind of establishing their characters and who they are as people. At the very beginning of the scene, IRS agents come to Ken Miles' shop, and we learn that he's in kind of dire straits financially, so that he's got a lot riding on this. And then we go right into sort of this is kind of a preliminary trial race, so you'll get this is really sort of the first sort of time that we see Ken Miles driving. So you'll get a sense of who these two characters are and their interplay with each other, and then the way these guys handle these amazing race sequences. Do you want to say anything before we start about what's the car that Ken's driving? Anything we need to set
It's
that
a
up?
Ford Cobra.
Okay,
And
it's Ford
this
Cobra.
is early on in Ken's not his career, but he's not a known name really at this point. He's doing small circuits, and we're just establishing the dynamic between Matt Damon and Christian Bale. We haven't gotten into any of the big corporation deals with Ford or Ferrari at this point in the film.
Great. Let's roll the first clip.
I'm gonna outbrake you on the next turn, Bob! Nice try, Bob!
Nice move from Ken Miles. 22 laps remaining with Bill Hill and Dan Gurney in the lead.
Does it make you want to watch more? It's really extraordinary work. There's a lot of racing in this movie.
There is.
We're going to show some scenes from the very famous Le Mans race a little bit later. But how of the running length of the film? I feel like there's a good at least 30 or 40 minutes of the movie that is in race sequences, especially the Le Mans scene at the end. That's a big part of the last third of the movie.
Yeah, Le Mans is about 45 minutes.
Le Mans sequence is 45 minutes long.
No, I think it's longer than 25. Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet.
I'm going to go with Don on this one. How do you build a race car sequence that's that long and keep it interesting?
Well, it is 24
acoustically?
hours.
But no, I mean, but for building you're making a movie, building a movie sequence for an audience, which is race car driving. How do you modulate and how do you approach it and keep it interesting for a good length of time?
Well, the sequence that we're talking about at the end of the film, which is the what everything's building up to, the main Le Mans race, is really about 4 acts as you start to dissect it. And we had to spend an awful lot of time going through. Like in that sequence there was no music going on apart from the little internal moment. But in the large 45-minute sequence, we had to sort of break it down into where do we need the excitement to occur, both musically and from the effects standpoint, and when does the race become emotional and hopefully not boring. Obviously at the beginning of the race, there's everyone's full on, huge cars, huge music, it's very exciting, people trying to get into the lead. But as the race evolves, we get sort of 10 hours into a 24-hour race, you can't keep that level of excitement up. It just becomes incredibly boring for the audience and tedious to listen to. So we had to really pick our moments, Dave and I, in the final, to weave the music in and out and see where we're going to take over with emotion, or where we're going to take over with pure racing, and just lead the audience into the feelings that Jim wanted to portray, while at the same time, hopefully making it build from the beginning of the race to the end to a peak, certainly emotionally. While it's obvious that there's a lot of racing, there's a lot of car sounds and all the rest and excitement in the film, which is great. There's also an underlying character development and story about people that carries the film through from top to bottom. And kudos to Jim for writing that and to allowing that to happen. So we took a long time, is I guess the short answer. We took a long time going through sequences, taking out music, taking out effects, recomposing music, going with emotion or going with raw effects to try and shape that in the final.
Well, there's a wonderful moment in the scene that we just showed where I think part of what you're talking about too is you have to modulate, right? You have to play with the dynamic range. And there's that really lovely moment when you're really in the thick of the race and things are heating up, and then you almost pull most of the effects away. You go very sort of internal into Christian Bale's head, and I'm hearing his breath really present through his nostrils. And I love sound design that does that sort of like that puts me into the emotional experience of the character, and the movie's full of moments like that.
Yeah, and that one's a little bit odd, out of context for you all now, but it relates to an earlier scene in the film, and hopefully makes sense when you see the film in context.
The funny thing is that Christian he came into the cutting room and he saw that scene, and he went crazy. He said, we need more of that. And Jim goes, oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
So did you do an ADR breathing session with Christian Bale just through his nostrils?
Oh, he's great. He's so good at breathing. Well, we ended up putting that internal moment into other scenes in the film.
So that wasn't actually part of the original conception for
that one was
those, but you found more moments.
But he said like that's a great thing. He said we should do more, and Jim went, yes, we should do more, and we did do more. Yeah.
Don, can you talk a little bit about what must have been just the monumental challenge of building, putting together the car sounds in the library for the film?
Well, I have to give my secret weapon credit. Jay Wilkinson got on early and tackled the cars, and but I knew from the beginning that we had to get the real cars. I mean, Jay was doing a fantastic job of selling the race, but I knew if we didn't get a GT40, if we didn't get a Ferrari P3, we'd be remiss.
Well, because there are people who will know.
I'm waiting for them. I'm waiting for them to come around an alley and say that wasn't a GT40. It was. This one was. But we looked for GT40s around the world, and we found all the GT40s, and I think we contacted as many as we could. And the funny thing is that if you owned a $30 million car, you don't want people to record it and drive it around a racetrack and have men climbing all over it with microphones. You don't want that. So a lot of people said no, but we did find a guy in Ohio who built his own GT40 out of real GT40 parts, and actually Ford came and inspected it and authorized it as a legitimate GT40 and gave it a serial number.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Bolted on his door, and he let us record that. So we got our GT40. We got it was very, very authentic, and so that made us really happy. And then we found a Ferrari. We couldn't find the real Ferrari. We found a pretty close Ferrari. We found a '59 Testarossa V12, and we recorded that. And we had to do that in Florida because even though the guy owned it in Georgia, the ordinances in Georgia wouldn't let him race it because it was too loud. So we went, great. We want that car. So we took it down to Florida and recorded it there. So those are the two main cars. And I knew that once we got those cars, we had the authority to actually say these are real cars.
What was your secret sauce? How did you mic them? How did you get those recordings?
We used one mic. It's just one mic. No, I don't know. Go ahead, Dave.
John Fasal was the location recordist, and he went out and recorded.
And Eric Potter.
Eric Potter, right. And they mic'd the cars. They had mics on transaxles. They had mics inside. There was all stationary mics outside on the track. And so the cars were quite wide. I had 16 channels of sound for the car interior, and similarly for buys. So it was really, they did a great job. It was all really well recorded, and gave us lots to work with.
Was this a Dolby Atmos mix from the beginning? You guys knew what you were going to do?
Yeah, it was at Native Atmos.
And so how did that, what did that allow you to do, working natively in Atmos in terms of, like the directionality of the car buys is so stunning in the film.
Well, mostly, I mean, it was when we were working in my room. It's 7.1, so I'm just thinking what's going to go in Atmos when I'm working, and so I'll have all my sessions built, and then I'll have Atmos tracks down the bottom. And when I get on the stage, when we got to Fox, it was then I could take things that I wanted to put in the Atmos track. So kind of, as we were going through, I'm thinking what I'm going to use in Atmos, what I'll utilize it for. So
you were working primarily like with 7.1 beds, and then you would keep a certain number of effects that you wanted to use as objects, and when you got to the stage, you would start to move those around.
Yeah, I mean, they were used in the 7.1 bed as well. And now I know what this is going to sound like in 7.1 as well when we do the fold down. But knowing I would, tag it or color code it that I'm going to put these in Atmos object tracks. And I used it for crowds and winds and rain, things that went over our heads.
Yeah, we flew a plane through the theater.
It's a great sequence.
It sounded just like that. No, and then musically, that clip, obviously, I think I just realized the clips that we're playing today don't have a lot of music in them. But
it's not that we have anything against music or composers. But we're really proud to show off the extraordinary sound design.
Actually, there's music all over this next one.
Yeah, okay, I take it back. But what I was trying to say was, with the music, I had great flexibility from Marco Bertrami and Buck Sanders, who were the composers, and then through Ted Kaplan, who was our music editor. I got all the instruments completely separate and was able to go through pre-mixes that I did at my studio, where I put everything into 5.1 format, but kept everything very, very wide, and then took that to the final, spread into a 7.1 bed, and then started allocating Atmos as needed.
I'm kind of curious, what sort of Atmos work did you do with the music? What did you use as objects that you would either, did you primarily put things into the overheads, or what did you do?
No, not overheads. I always do a 7.1 bed. I never do any, I never use the +2. And then anything I use that goes up there, it becomes an object. But it's environmental parts of the recording of the score, and delays, primarily delays. I do there's a lot of singular guitar work in the score, where there's two guitars playing off of each other, which I kept principally towards the left and principally towards the right as a general template. And then I did a lot of diagonal across the room panning of delays and reverb treatments for each one of those, so that we're not just going front to back, but we're actually moving across the room and utilize the objects for those also.
And that just opens it up and gives it a sense of size and space.
A sense of size, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, were there any usable production tracks that came in during the race car sequence? I can imagine that must have been really horrible conditions for the poor production sound mixer.
Well, we had to take away all the production of the cars because they were all kits. They all had Mazda engines or Chevy engines or something like that. And although they were big engines, they weren't the right engine. So with that, when those came out, we had to fill everything back in, and sometimes the dialogue left. But a lot of times the dialogue was cleaned up pretty well by using some isotope.
And Harrison.
And Harrison, and we hired a guy to do it. He was good.
He's got some skills.
Yeah. But the cars had to be completely built from the ground up. And also, what's interesting is that this was shot in the desert. This is not shot in Le Mans. And there was no crowds. And so when you see the film, you'll see 100,000 people there. They were all added later. And it's just beautiful to see what they can do visually. And so we had to make that. And so
what you're describing, it's almost like a little bit like an animated film. Like once you took the kit car sounds out, you really had very little. There was nothing.
It was a dream come true for me. Yeah, because it was like a blank slate. I mean, you couldn't use the cars. And then of course the shots of them inside the car, that was just a rig, and there was all this kind of going on. I'm good at sound, right? And so everything had to be cleaned up.
Although I will say we took an awful lot to. Polly McKinnon was the dialogue editor. Between her and Don, we managed to take pretty much all the production that was in any way usable into the final mix as extracts, with ADR as alternatives. And once we got the balance of the music and the effects in the bigger races, quite a bit, a surprisingly large amount of the production was able to be used.
Well,
if the performance was better.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry. She actually took some engines out of the dialogue, which was unbelievable. What she could, I mean, this really loud engine she pulled out. Amazing.
She did a great job.
Kudos to her. Yeah, that's amazing. Let's take a look at the second clip. So this is we're kind of in the middle of the Le Mans race at this point in the clip. It's like Paul was saying, it's a 24-hour car race, and we're deep into it. It's the middle of the night, and of course, for some added acoustic fun, it's in a terrible rainstorm. So you got a car race in the middle of the night in a big rainstorm, and Carroll Shelby does a little shenanigans with the Ferrari's stopwatches. Do we need to set anything up?
Well, what you're about to see is true. These are little known facts that once Jim learned about what Carroll Shelby would do in the pit, he included it in the film. So this is a great sort of reveal.
There you go. Let's take a look at this second clip.
You're getting boxed in. He's not batting on a full wicket, that one. Easy, Dan. Oh, bloody hell. You arsehole. Split arse out, don't you?
Dave, I'd love to hear from you about some of the challenges of putting that sequence together.
That crash of the sign going over was tough. We could never get it right for Jim. We started before there was a sign there. The car goes off and the sign was supposed to be there. And so it hit the hay bales and it hit something and it's like, he needed something hard there. And we kept tackling it. Then the visual came and it just, we went after that for a while till he was ultimately happy, I hope.
You never know what's going to be the thing that is the troublesome element that takes a long time to come together.
That's especially with Jim, I find, because some things I would think that would be big things he's great with, and then it'll be little things that I got to figure out what he's after to really.
I think he was really like pushing for the wood of the sign through the engines and the rain and the hay, and he'll pick certain sounds that he just wants to promote, and it's hard sometimes.
I imagine that's the case, and I'm curious to hear. That was the music is driving pretty. It's pretty present in that scene, and obviously it's just wall to wall sound effects as well. So, can you talk a little bit about how did you guys work together on the stage? Were you slapping each other's hands away from the faders, and what's how do you decide which is going to step forward in a given moment, the music or the sound effects?
Well, little known to Dave, I had a master fader for the effects, so I was just pulling it out. No.
On your phone.
Obviously, we have to. The music in that sequence was very, very rhythmic. It had an awful lot of low end in the bass pattern and the drum pattern, and yet Dave had the roar of the engines. He had all the suspension issues going on. He had the transients of the foot pedals coming in and out. I ended up having to throughout that section. Well, we just worked very closely together with it, but from a music standpoint, I had to pull out an awful lot of the low-end rhythm in that sequence and sort of trick the audience into thinking the music's still going by using the top end of the guitars and the hi-hat and such, while the engine roars were taking that frequency spectrum. There was just no point competing, and likewise he would let go when there was a melodic pattern that needed to come through.
And for me too, I'm always working against Paul's music, and then trying to hit key things. So it's not just engine all the time. I want to hear the rain and the wheel well, like just things that are quick in and out that can play with the music and not just be loud and big against music with engine all the time. So it was kind of working that way until it's feeling really good.
Well, that kind of detail and finesse, I mean, it just takes time, right? So I'm curious, Dave, for you, like how much, you were building your tracks in 7.1, kind of pre-mixing even before you got to the stage, but like how much time did you pre-mix before you guys got to the final stage? And did you have access to the music during that period at all, or it was just going to be a surprise for you when you got on?
No, I had access with the temp music for spotting purposes, but the score came in when we finaled that, and we had 3 weeks to pre-dub in the big stage on the Ford stage.
Were you guys pre-dubbing at the same time on two separate stages, or were you okay?
Yeah, I was mixing in my studio.
You were
dialogue.
You were pre-dubbing dialogue, and
Yeah.
you were pre-dubbing effects for 3 weeks on your own before you came to the final mix stage. But I mean, it sounds like a long time, but it is a 2.5-hour movie, and there's a lot going on. And then the final mix was how long?
1 day.
6 weeks, I think. Well, with all of the
One long
reviews
day.
and all of the print masters and all of the deliverables, it was 6 weeks. So take a couple of weeks off of that for deliverables. It's about a month. But Aaron Downing, the post supervisor at Fox on the film, was insistent on just trying to keep people civilized. So we didn't do long days, which was fantastic. We didn't really do weekends. It was Monday to Friday, and it was about 8 o'clock, sort of latest. I did prior to the final, I did 2 weeks on dialogue, ADR, and group, and then 5 days on the music before I got to the final.
Yeah. Well, that's great because I mean there's so much material in here, and it tends to be a little loud. It's good to have those normal work days just to prevent burnout.
Yeah,
and
we
fatigue.
were really grateful for that.
Yeah, it helped.
Yeah.
And for
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for a scene like that too, the great thing was that we would have the time alone to do it and build the track. Like we'd do a faders up run with Jim in the morning, present the reel, and then we would go and work. He would go away. We would work on it, get it to a place where we're close and comfortable, and then finesse when he would come back.
And an interesting thing is they're always adding rain. That's visually added. So there was points where we went really heavy with rain visually, and so when we matched it sonically, Jim didn't like it. It was eating up everything, and so they reduced the amount of rain in the picture.
This is twice a day we've heard this, that they actually changed the picture to make the sound better.
Yeah.
I think this is a trend that we should embrace.
I agree.
That's great. Should we look at the last clip?
Sure.
So we're going a little bit out of order. This chronologically in the film, this last clip happens before the Le Mans race. This is. I want to set this up properly. This is my favorite scene in the movie. So they're embarking on this huge project, the Ford Corporation, to build this car that will compete at Le Mans and compete against the Ferraris, who have had a tight grip on this race for a long, long, long time. So they're well into the process, but there's a little bit of an internal power struggle happening between Carroll Shelby and some executives at the Ford company. So they're kind of coming out to LAX to where Shelby and his team are building the car to kind of do a power play, and Carroll Shelby surprises them and gives Mr. Ford an impromptu ride in his very expensive race car and kind of gives him the ride of his life. So let's take a look at this scene.
Open the door! Hey, open the door! Open the door!
Just to hold me right there, and you take my hand. Oh, God!
Sat on my nuts.
We're gonna build the next one for comfort, don't you worry.
Open the door.
Sorry, sir. If you just give me a moment.
Open the door!
You ready?
The name on the middle of that steering wheel should tell you that I was born ready, Shelby. Hit it.
Attaboy. Oh, that's got a little kick, doesn't it?
Oh, there we go. Good God, Mr. Levy. You okay, sir?
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Yeah, baby! Yeah, baby!
Great performance by Tracy Letts as Ford.
Definitely.
I think that that scene also gives you a sense of like, it's when we talk about this movie, it's really easy to focus on, let's talk about the big race car scenes and but there's great character and it's great story and it's great storytelling and sound serves an amazing part of that process. So talk a little bit about putting that, because obviously you want the audience to have the same experience that Mr. Ford is having in that moment. So how do you put the sound together for that? A lot of low end, obviously.
Well, first you take away the production car, and then you add the real car, and then you just crank it to 11. And I think part of the powerful thing about that is when it stops, you get the sense of what it really was. And we're really fortunate that when we turned off the engine, the airport was still there, but it was not, it was just air, basically.
There's a great, I'm not sure if anyone noticed, but at the very end when Ford is crying, that is all production, obviously, and
Right.
we try to enhance and keep with every single one of his little subs. But back deep in the background, there's a single engine sort of Piper Cherokee flying around, and that was live production that happened to be happening at the time. And it's just a wonderful little moment of the scale of this massive monster of a car down to a tiny little engine that's going over the top as he's crying and realizing how difficult it is to control this machine. So it's a great moment. I love that moment.
Jim says, "Yeah, take that plane and lower it, raise it," or it's like, no, it's just right there, Jim. We didn't add it.
We actually tried to remove it
Yeah.
for a while, and it was ridiculous because the crying was so wonderful to
Was
hold
so
on
perfect.
to. Yeah.
The irony is that Piper airplane probably had less horsepower than the car that they were driving. Right?
Yes.
Before we open up for questions, any fun final stories that you want to tell about the mix process or working with James?
It's always an adventure working with James. He's a joy to work with. He truly is. He's so smart. He's so about storytelling. He challenges all these different genres from Logan to Walk the Line to 310 to Yuma to this film. He does everyone's with such finesse, and he's truly interested in sound. More than interested, he's passionate about sound, and it's just great to work with him.
He's a director who seems to know how to use sound really as a storytelling tool. I didn't even congratulate you guys on Logan, but Logan is one of really my favorite superhero movie from the past 10 years or so.
Great.
Let's open up and take some questions. Mike, do you have a microphone? Any questions for these guys?
Hey guys, thanks for coming out. I'm curious with all the amount of cars you guys had on the show and the amount of recording, how'd you guys manage editorial-wise and track layout and being able to keep things interesting from editorial to mix?
Track layout, I kept, I had 4 predubs for the GT40, and they were all 16 channels wide, 4 for the Ferraris, and then I had incidental cars, tires and suspension were all separate, and crashes separate, design of predubs separate. So I had like 26 effects predubs, and so that was really helpful for me for separation wise. And I had like 24 to 30 channels of props and 24 channels of feet. So I just kept my groups separate. Does that answer your question?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Congrats on a great sounding film. So my question was, obviously you owe some amount of realism to the cars that you talked about in the edit and in the design process. I'm wondering if you, at different points in the film, decided to enhance any of that with either elements from cars that weren't specific to those, or whether you used like non-diegetic type design to enhance, to beef things up or make it more sort of larger than life, or did you pretty much try to, as a rule, stick to the raw stuff that you guys got from Eric and John?
Well, I'm going to say that this is pretty much a real deal thing. I mean, like in any movie, you're going to augment certain areas that don't match the picture because you don't, when you're recording, you don't know how it's going to be cut in. There was a point where we were using other cars in the temps, very early on, and they were great. But Jim kept asking for more and more and more, and I kept saying, well, when we get the real cars, then you can ask for more and more and more, because we're asking for the wrong more at the moment. So.
Yeah, all the cars running, as you know, for the GT40 and the Ferrari, that's the cars. Sometimes on the buys and things we would enhance them just for impact, but it's the cars running by and large for the most part.
And the good news was that those engines were dramatic and big enough on their own that they didn't need a lot of help.
Yeah, the only issue was we really weren't allowed to take the cars onto a track and run them at 220 miles an hour. Because A, the driver was the owner and he wouldn't do it, and B, we didn't have a 3-mile track to do it. So part of that was trickery, just to make it seem like it was going that speed. But they're the engines, for sure.
I'm curious about like how did you translate, especially in the first clip, like it really felt like the car was far away, and then like it just had a lot of depth to it. How did you like translate that sound like in the mixing stage?
If it was in a long shot, we had exterior miking on cars, so it was probably used from perspective, and then I'd use some reverb and delays to kind of put some space around us, but trying to use mic positions that would be applicable to where it was geographically on the track.
That's important because there's only really so far that you can go taking a close mic'd object and trying to give the illusion that it's way far away. It's really helpful to have that variation in the miking positions when you're recording to have.
Do you guys deal with ear fatigue, like long scenes of motors and all that? Do you discuss that with Jim, and how do you handle it?
You're talking about ear fatigue, like from the audience? Like we don't want to exhaust the audience as they're going through the film?
Exactly, like using silence or mixing trickery.
Do you mean when we're mixing during days of mixing, or do you mean as an audience watches the film? Sorry.
Yeah, for the audience.
For the audience. Well, I think, in terms of the mix itself, the mixed days, as I mentioned, we purposely try to keep them to normal days and not go 15 hours a day. But also we'll mix sequences in dim, and we'll bring the levels down, and Dave and I try to maintain a certain peak in a film. Don't try to go to what the technology is allowing us to do. And then I think from the audience perspective, it's what we were talking about earlier in terms of creating highs and lows within the emotion and the arc of the whole film. A lot of that is to do with the pace of the picture editing, so that you get sequences that are full on in your face, and then we're into an office or a dialogue scene or a quieter moment. But then when it is full on for a long period of time, we're trying very hard to weave in and out of effects and music especially, so that we can carry the emotion more than just a flat out furious car race at all times, because you just couldn't watch that. It's too much.
Even when we're racing, we're telling a story, so we're very plot heavy, even on just cars trying to beat each other in a race. There's a story going on that we're ever mindful of.
Well, and one of the things that I didn't mention this before, but one of the things I think I really hand to you guys about this movie is they're long race sequences, but I never lost the geography. I knew exactly where I was. I knew which car I was in. I knew, you guys did a really great job of guiding the audience through that experience.
And part of that is the editors. The editors did a great job. So we're really grateful to them for that.
As far as the car onboards went, you had all these mic angles, and were you trying to follow perspective when mixing, from the intake or from the muffler, everything following camera angles, or are you trying to get a nice kind of overall mix character of each car and trying to kind of follow that through? And how much of that was in the editing process, and how much of that was just having availability to mix, at the final?
It was always going for the sound of the car mostly, and what felt right for where we were. I had all the mics, so it was a matter of deciding what I wanted to use where and what I wanted to lean on. That was done more editorially than on the mix stage. I felt like I was pretty much there by the time I got to the mix stage, and then if I wanted to push something, I knew where to go for it.
We got time for one more question.
The film obviously already sounds amazing and different than a lot of other, race car films that we've seen throughout our lifetime. What, in your guys' opinion, on this film makes it different than all the, other dozens and dozens of race car films that we've seen in the last few decades? Did you purposely go into it thinking, okay, we're going to try something different, try not to sound like every other race car film, or did that just kind of like naturally evolve into that?
I'm going to give credit to our director, who did not want to make a race movie per se. When you ask him what this movie is about, he said it's about two men and their friendship and the struggle they had against the corporate structure that was trying to control their lives. And there's also cars in it, and I think that's how he approached the whole thing, so that when we actually do a race, it's context, and we know why they're racing, we know who they're racing, we know what it means to the characters, and I think he brought that sensibility, mindful sensibility to us whenever we were doing any race scenes.
Yeah, I would say, for me, the main difference is a lot of other sort of racing movies. You can kind of tell that the characters were kind of an afterthought. Like, it's really just about how do let's get to the next racing sequence. But it's very different with Ford versus Ferrari. These are really great characters, and obviously, as you can tell, there are no finer actors. Like Christian Bale and Matt Damon are amazing in the film, and as well as the supporting actors as well. So that's all the time that we have. I want to thank these guys for coming out today and talking to us about Ford versus Ferrari.
Thank you.
So thanks for sticking around. This is going to be part 2 of our conversation on Ford versus Ferrari. I'm here with production sound mixer Steve Morrow, who is nominated for an Academy Award in the Best Sound Mixing category. And you, this is the 5th season that we've done on this special Dolby Institute Soundworks Collection Oscar podcast, and this is your 3rd appearance.
3rd, yeah.
After getting nominated for La La Land, and then again for A Star Is Born.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice to have you back.
Good to be back.
So how did you get involved with Ford versus Ferrari? How did you get on this movie?
Ford versus Ferrari was a movie that came along. James Mangold's post-production supervisor, Aaron Downing, who I think heads post-production at 20th Fox. Him and I have been friends for 20 years, and we've always tried to hook up together on a movie together, and this one was finally the one that worked out. James and I were gonna do a movie, The Deep Blue Goodbye, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it got canceled last minute due to an actor being injured, and so it was just 5 days before we were gonna start shooting, it just got canned.
So Ford versus Ferrari, I mean, obviously this movie, the signature set piece is about the race car, the big Le Mans race and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So you know that this is coming, you get the script. Like, what's your process for kind of getting ready and prepping to do production sound mixing on a movie like this?
I think the biggest prep is just realizing the circumstances you're going to be in. I think realizing that this is a race car movie, and the cars are going to be loud, and there's dialogue in the race cars while it's driving in. And even though, there's some trickery in movie making where it might not be the actual GT40 that you're filming in, it's still going to be a pod car. It's still going to be powered by a loud, fast engine, and you're going to have to be mobile, and you're going to have to be able to record the high decibel range that those cars have. And so reading that, I immediately started researching. Okay, well, what's the loudest that
how loud could they possibly
Yeah, how
be?
loud could it be? And it's kind of like 140 decibels, and it's like, okay, you start looking at your microphones and you realize none of them go up that loud, and so you start researching and you start looking into what mic is going to hold up in that range. And I landed on a DPA. I want to say it's a 4066, but it's basically it'll go up to 156 decibels.
Are you serious?
Yeah, but which is amazing for loud sounds, but it's terrible for dialogue. Right, so it's not good. Like, I wouldn't say terrible, but it's not the greatest.
It's not what it's designed.
It's not ideal. Yeah, it's designed for super loud. So, in those moments in the cars, we switch mics, on Christian and go with that. We actually used it on Henry Ford when he's given the big speech to the Ford factory. We use it because we knew he was going to be projecting. It was going to be loud. It was going to be.
Tracy Letts is a very theatrical actor.
Yeah.
And he can fill a room with that voice. And so.
Oh, and he filled that entire factory with that voice, and it was great, and it sounded amazing. And so that mic is made for that loud, high volume, and that's kind of where we started. That was the jumping off point. And okay, how to record the voices, and then hey, we can actually use these in the engines as well to just kind of do bonus stuff, just for editorial sake, for easy sound effects.
That came up in our conversation with Don.
Yeah.
When we had that conversation a few weeks ago, which was, and I had never thought about this. The cars looked accurate, but the engines were the wrong engines.
Right, totally wrong.
Right. So they all had to be replaced later on.
Yeah, and we knew it. To be honest, on day one, Jim, hey, good to see you. Okay, here's the deal, Steve. This is a race car movie. We're going to have old cars. They're going to be loud. Do the best you can. Don't worry about it. I understand. You don't have to tell me every time there's a loud car. I get it. Okay, great. We'll get the best dialogue we can for you.
Yeah.
And beyond that, we won't bother you unless it's something critical.
Right.
And that's kind of how we went forward to it. So, like in the Ferraris in the movie, I think were Volkswagen engines. And,
sure.
These aren't the cars that you need to focus all your energy on recording on set because we're not going to use them.
Yeah.
Right.
In terms of your mandate was not give me lots of great recordings of these cars because we know you're not right.
Right. Yeah. The mandate was get the performance, get the dialogue. Don't worry if there's a loud noise over it. We get it. It's like it's a period film with lots of cameras and lots of loud cars.
But were they able to actually retain some of your production dialogue tracks in the cars if they were replacing all that?
Yeah, I think the majority of the tracks were retained. I do think though that once you have an engine that is, say the I'm trying to think of a good example of when they would replace it. I mean, it's basically anytime there's somebody pulls into the pits.
Right.
If it's a really obnoxiously loud engine, they're going to replace the dialogue in that moment because they want the engine in the car to sound right. Because there's going to be a ton of, of car guys who are like, what's that?
Right,
But there's tricks that the guys can do in post to clean up a little bit and then put the engine on top of it. So not everything is replaced. But there's definitely a majority, a minority of dialogue that's not going to survive, and we all know it.
Yeah.
So it's not a process that you are precious with. You just go, okay, this is going to be what it is.
I feel like you've carved out some territory as being the go-to guy for very difficult, almost impossible kind of situations. I remember stories that you were telling with La La Land, the opening sequence on the freeway, and you hid all of the playback speakers, and at the same time you're recording
miles.
This was just amazing. And then the stories that you were telling from Star is Born about Bradley Cooper and just having a 90 seconds to capture some performance at Glastonbury or Coachella or Stagecoach or whatever it was. So you really
I attract a technical. I think I attract. I try not to overthink it. So I'm not overthinking these jobs, but I'm trying to make it. As usable as possible, and somehow I attract just more of a technical, challenging movie.
So what was it? What was the big challenge for you? I mean, obviously there's the race car stuff, but was that
the race car stuff? Was more of something to get over. It's going to be noisy. How do we get around that? I think the technical side of this was always being ready. There'll be scenes where there's two actors listed as talking. Matt Damon and Christian Bale. They're going to have a conversation. Well, there's 9 other actors surrounding them. They're stunt guys, but they're all, they can all talk. They all have their SAG card. So what we would do is we made sure that, okay, well, Christian and Matt get mic'd. Everybody gets mic'd. If they're allowed to talk,
you want to capture it.
We're going to capture it, and they're probably going to say something.
Right.
Because the way Jim works is he'll see the first take, and then he'll love what he sees, and then he'll add a little bit, he'll tweak a little bit, he'll change it. And you never want to be the department goes, oh wait, he's going to talk now? Okay, let me fix that.
Give me 10 minutes while you're.
Yeah, it's like even if you're fast at 30 seconds, you're wasting a lot of time every day if you're doing that every day. So we kind of jumped in knowing that was a potential, and from day one we're like, okay, anybody that can talk is gonna talk. Let's mic them all. Let's track them all. And that was kind of something we went towards on The Front Runner with Jason Reitman. It was 21 people in every scene, all talking, all ad-libbing. And you just have to be prepared for it. And as long as everybody's mic'd and recorded.
Like a Robert Altman kind of night.
It was Robert Altman on crack. If you see the movie, it's like, it's, all that sound was just there on set, and they didn't re-record anything in the movie. Yeah. And they used most of it as backgrounds.
Interesting.
Which is kind of wild to record that. But so we kind of treated that the same way in this film. It was, 10, 12, 14 tracks of just anybody that can do it.
Yeah. You said we. Who's on your team?
It's Craig Dollinger and Brian Mendoza on this one. Craig and I have gone back for 20 years now. Brian comes and goes depending on, right now he's on the Orville.
Right.
So, he's, because we go out of town, he doesn't come out of town with us because the productions don't let it. So, So, as a utility guy, you have to find that.
Yeah.
Find that path in town.
So are these guys are all on radio mics and you're combining that with booms, or kind of how do you approach this stuff?
This movie was probably 90% radio mics. The way Faden, Papa Michael, with the way his cinematography was, with multiple cameras, wides, tights, everything just to capture that moment. Because sometimes the light is perfect for 10 minutes. As you see the movie, there's a ton of sunset shots.
Sure, there's a lot of golden hours.
There's a lot of golden hour, and it's beautiful. And it's one of those things you don't want to get in the way. And so everybody's always mic'd, and then you boom what you can if you need to. But there's a lot of noise, a lot of wind, a lot of race cars, a lot of,
and you had really noisy locations, like the interior of that hangar where they were building the cars must have been.
It's Ontario Airport.
Must have been acoustically very challenging for you.
Yeah, that's a big
hangar at the airport.
Yeah,
at a live airport.
Yeah,
so there's planes going over constantly.
Yeah, Amazon's taking off every 5 minutes with an airplane, and that's a real airport, Ontario. The Le Mans pits was Agua Dulce Airport.
They built the Le Mans pits at an airport.
Yeah, they needed the runway for the speed,
just to make it difficult for you.
Yeah, luckily there was no planes landing. They would have hit us, but no, they needed it for the speed. Because you needed to be able to get up to 100 plus miles an hour and then be able to coast. Yes, you need a long straightaway.
That's amazing.
But yeah, all those locations, what they had in common was wind. It was a windy movie.
Oh, sure.
When we shot middle of summer, and so it was 110 degrees with 30, 40 mile an hour winds. I mean, the opening race, where he bashes his trunk open.
Christian Bale's character is kind of proving himself, right?
Yeah. That was, it's hard to see, but every once in a while you can see a flag, like an American flag on a rooftop, and it's just straight. And it's like.
So what do you do in that circumstance?
You do the best you can. I mean, Christian was great. We could mess with him almost every other take to try to move his mic, to try to adjust it. You don't want to put so much, wind and wind protection on it that you're just muffling the sound.
Right.
So there's a balance, but there are takes where you just go, okay, come on, no wind. Okay, perfect. That was great. And there are takes where you get hit with the wind. It happens, but you do the best in protecting the mic and burying it as deep as you can without it just destroying their voice.
Yeah.
And we were successful at that throughout that movie, and then the guys in post were able to really, the dialogue editor is magic, right?
Sure.
I mean, they're able to really clean it up and fix a lot of the issues that you have you have no control over on set.
Yeah.
But yeah, that movie was just, it was really a practice in wind protection, because we were outdoors and it was windy the entire movie.
And if it's not windy, you're in a car that's moving fast and there's going to be a lot of air moving around.
Yeah.
Doing that,
Yeah, and that wasn't too bad actually, because it has windshields and, there's only so much wind that you can have in a car, but yeah, it was going to be loud.
Did you hide in the car with your mixer?
No. No, actually, they had a pod car, and so there's a stunt driver in a little pod on top of the roof, essentially. And it's just the inside of the GT40 and Christian and a couple remote head cameras. And I put a bag rig and strapped it down with a bunch of ratchet straps. And we would broadcast the audio. We would embed the audio into one of the cameras, and the camera would feed it to a microwave system, and the microwave would send it a half mile or a mile away to Video Village where we all were.
Wow.
Because once the car goes and it's going 100 miles an hour, it's
gone.
pretty much gone within 10 seconds, and range-wise of Comtex, it's going to be gone. So we embedded into that, and then everybody had, we'd open up a speaker at the Village and you could watch the scene unfold. And as long as they had an image, which they did, because it was a microwave system, that they had the specialty guys in there.
So you were microwaving back, but were you recording at the Video Village, or was that was a little recorder that was in the car with
a recorder in the car that we had outputs to the camera and embedded, but we would bring it back. We wouldn't record it back because as soon as if the video glitched out, so would the audio. So, but which was okay, but you couldn't have that on the recording, so the recording went with the car.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you dream of being a production sound mixer when you were a little kid growing up?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't know if anybody dreams of being a production sound mixer when they're. I think I was probably in love with movies since before I can remember being in love with movies. But from the age of 8, I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm making movies.
Yeah.
So I think when you're 8 years old, and this was 36 years ago or so. I think it's like a Spielberg movie, E.T., all those movies where you're just like, the world is open in this cinematic universe. It's just, it kind of just attracts that creative part of you. So that's kind of what I wanted to do, just get into film any way I could.
Right.
And then getting into sound for me was really fun because you get to be on set, you get to watch the movie being made, you get to hear it better than anybody, and you get to participate in a way that, other departments don't in the final product.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just like kind of a golden spot.
You get to hang out with Christian Bale and Matt Damon and all the actors, right?
So I have a funny story about Christian Bale. This is a good story. It happened 2 days ago. So we got nominated on Monday morning.
Right.
And I get a text out of the blue saying, hey, congratulations on your nomination. Well deserved. Congratulations, mate. This is Christian. And I'm looking at my phone going, thank you, Christian who?
Did you really?
Because I don't know. Christian Bale's not texting me on a daily basis.
You and Christian Bale aren't really texting.
No, I mean, I didn't have his number saved in my phone.
Yeah.
Christian who? And it took about a minute, and he responded, Ken Miles, mate. Great job. Okay, good, thanks. Sent a nice thank you back, but it was like, Christian, nobody Christian doesn't text me. But he was, it was really sweet, really nice of him to do.
So you do have Christian's number now?
I have somebody's number. But
maybe his texting assistant.
Yeah, his texting number. Yeah.
Well, so what was your path? How did you get into production sound?
Well, so for me, my path was, I was in Seattle. That's where I grew up, like the high school years. And out of high school, I went to a community college there to take some film classes. I just wanted to figure out how to make movies and how to make short films. And all the sound on all my shorts were terrible.
Of course.
I mean, it was just like, this is terrible. How do I make this better?
Sound on student short films is always terrible.
Right, it's terrible. So I took a sound class and I learned, you hold the boom, you plug it in, here's how it all works. And I started doing that for my projects, for other people's projects, and the professor...
That's how you get to be the sound guy.
Exactly, that's how you become the sound guy. And so the professor said, hey, try to get a job on a local movie, and here's a film hotline for the Washington State Film Hotline. And back then they were making movies up in the Northwest, before they realized they just go a few more miles to Canada. It was cheaper. But so they would make movies there, and it was script supervisor, craft service, or boom operator. Were the three positions. And I went, I know what craft service does. I don't know what a script supervisor does, but I can boom.
Yeah.
And I bugged them and I harassed them for weeks. And I said, I'll work for free. Just get me on set. I'll work for free. I'll work for free. And sure enough, they hired me. And
what was the movie?
Where the Air is Cool and Dark.
Huh.
It was about a logger who moved to New York and moved back addicted to heroin. So we were in the logging, he goes back to the hometown. It's a logging town, and it was interesting. It was just rained on us the entire time, and we were outside, and it was miserable.
What makes a good boom operator besides staying out of the shot?
Well, I think a good personality on set. I mean, he's really the one who's interacting with the camera operators and the actors and the cinematographers. They have to know how to radio mic somebody quick, but also effectively. I mean, they need to be a good communicator and just a nice person, because they are your ambassador.
Right.
You know, on set. You know, and they if they don't have a good attitude, or if they're not good people, you don't get much love from the rest of the crew. You know, because there's going to be 100 people on set that are there for the image.
That's right.
Makeup person, wardrobe, set deck, lighting. Everybody's there for the image, which is great. But there's only 3 of us for sound. And if you can't make friends, then nobody's going to help you. You know?
And you need help.
And you need help. I mean, everything can mess you up. A bag of chips that an actor's given versus, you know, some other item that they could have instead. You know, you need like people who are, you know, aware of it. But, you know, it's easy just to get tunnel vision in your own department. You know, we all do it. So having a good boom operator that can really communicate with everybody is key.
So tell me a little bit about your process. So we were talking about prep earlier. When
Yep.
you get a script and you start to break down, what are you looking for? What kind of notes are you making to yourself? How are you thinking ahead?
It depends on the film. If it's a musical, I think, okay, from scene to scene, I think, okay, well, what equipment do I think I need? Do I have everything that I need? At this point in my career, I have everything for a musical, and right, I have everything. So it's like, you know, okay, what do I make sure? You know, so I'm going through a script to see what new toys, what new equipment do you need for this movie to make it work. Some movies, like Front Runner, where it was all just dialogue based, I started counting. I'm like, oh, there's 22 actors here. Listed, you know, and then call the director and say, hey, when these actors are listed, you're going to have them talk, because they're not scripted. There's only 2 people scripted, but there's 22 people in this scene. But no, anytime there's somebody in the scene, I want them all to talk. I'm going to give them a little booklet. They're going to know what's happened. So I knew that was coming. So you start counting your radio mics and go, oh, I need 7 more. You know, I need to have 22 on that day. So that's kind of that's what my process is just breaking it down, going, okay, what do I need to accomplish the movie in the right way? I think A Star Is Born, I probably didn't make any money on the movie because I spent it all on equipment up front, right? I mean, it's like, here's how much money we have for your rental. And I went, oh, I think I need 60 grand worth of gear just to make this work.
Yeah.
But it's not a matter of, you know, do I need to make money on every single movie? It's how do I do the best job possible for that story?
Right.
And I think, you know, because the money comes and goes and projects come and go, but the quality of work will stay or it won't.
Yeah.
You know, and so the goal is never for me, it's never to just do the bare minimum. I want to do as much as possible.
Yeah.
You know, to make the movie better.
Tell me about the tech scouting process. When when you go on those with the director, usually the DP is there, and you know, various department heads. What do you? I mean, obviously you're listing for, is this a terrible location for sound? But what? Tell me about that process.
Yeah, I think by the time the sound mixer's on the tech scout, location is picked, everything is set. So the only thing you really have control over is, you know, your best friend is the location manager at that point. Because you're not going to go to the director and say, this is terrible, we can't shoot here. I mean, that's never going to happen.
Right.
So your best scenario is to go to location manager and say, hey, you know, there's this air conditioning unit just above the set. Can that be turned off? Well, it kind of runs the whole building. Okay, is there a way that we can turn that off and give air to the rest of the building? You know, there's certain things that you can do that make your life easier on the day of shooting just by asking in the tech scout way in advance.
Right.
A lot of it's air conditioning. A lot of it's like, hey, that vending machine doesn't need to be on, and you know, refrigerating the Cokes that we're never going to see on camera.
Right.
Can we turn that off when we're shooting? And 90% of the time, it's yes, no problem. You know, because that's what locations does, right? And every once in a while, you'll be at a hospital and like, hey, can we turn that air conditioner? Well, it turns off the whole wing, and we can't do that because there's the pediatric wing or whatever. And you go, okay, totally understand. So when you show up on the day and there's the rumbling, it's not something you have to address again because you already know the answer. Right. So those are the positive things where you can just kind of move on and work your way around it. So that's kind of what you look for, you know, when you're location scouting or tech scouting. You know, you kind of look and see what it is, or, you know, does the AD department need, you know, speakers everywhere so they can cue people through, you know, a voice of God system, anything. So you're looking at just what do you need to accomplish it, because once you're there, the location is locked in. There's nothing, you know. I've had Jason Reitman ask me, you know, what do you think about this? Is this going to mess us up? You know, because he's very tuned in for sound. He's very tuned into sound, and I don't think there's been a time where they've picked a location where it was going to be bad for sound. It was just there was adjustments you had to make. Sure. But you know, for the most part, you tend not to pick lower budget movies. Pick worse locations because it's cheaper, right? Closer to the airports, louder locations. It's just cheaper to film there. But and that's probably when you need the most help.
Right.
But yeah, once it's that point, you just figure out what you can do to make it the best scenario.
So I remember when we talked about A Star Is Born, you were I think you were talking about one of your favorite days was the day that you guys shot the scene with Lady Gaga singing a cappella in the parking lot at the supermarket.
Yeah.
Tell me what was your favorite day on Ford versus Ferrari? Even though Lady Gaga's not in the film.
yeah. When she came out in the field, I think that it's two different movies. I think Ford versus Ferrari was kind of an exciting movie because certainly the cinematography looked incredible, even on a monitor. I mean, it was just one of these movies that just looked like a movie from day one. I mean, there was no question whether this was going to be an amazing movie. I think there are fun days when Matt Damon is flying the plane, where it's hysterical, because the plane's on the ground and they're playing along, but you just know that's going to be a funny scene,
I'm thinking about the scene with Tracy Letts and Matt Damon in the car when he's giving him
Oh,
a ride
yeah.
around. That's going to be just...
Oh, you're dying because you're like, this is incredible. For one, he's having a hard time getting in the car. Then he gets in the car and then they're like, let's hit it. And it's just, it's a classic thing. When they're fighting, Christian Bale and Matt Damon fighting in the park.
Right.
In the park, that little curb was rubber. So in case they hit the curb, it's not a piece of concrete. Yeah, they built it.
They replaced the curb with
They
rubber.
replaced the curb with a rubber curb so that, if they really got into it and
They weren't
really
gonna kill one of
they
their
weren't
movie
going to
stars.
they weren't going to kill each other. But it was an incredible scene. I mean, these guys were really going for it.
There's a really funny moment in that scene where I think it's Matt Damon. He picks up a can of good, and he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah, I should do some bread instead, because it's that moment where it's like, I want to kill him, but I don't really want to kill him, But these are things where it's never scripted. They're doing it, and it's just
that was an ad-lib moment? He just picked
those
up
are
the
ad-lib.
can?
I mean, look, it could have been one of those moments where Jim said, here's what you do, but it's not scripted. Like he picks up a can and decides bread is better. It's never scripted like that. So it's probably this moment where Jim and him and Christian, they work it out, but it's just like, those are golden moments where you just get to watch this performance, and it's kind of a fun. Those are those fun days where it's just like you just get to be a kid and watch these great actors doing what they do best.
For an audience member, I think one of the great pleasures of that movie is watching those two movie stars. Like they're at the top of their game, and they're just doing great work, and it seems effortless in a way.
Yeah, I mean, on set it felt very effortless. I mean, Christian was Ken Miles the entire time we were shooting.
Right.
I mean, I never saw him come out of that character. And him and his son were magical
like in
too.
in a sort of a method way.
Like in a method way, yeah. I mean, I don't know if Christian Bale is known for being a method actor, but in that movie, he embodied that character the entire time. And him and his son had a really fun relationship. I mean, when Miles pulls up after that first race and says, "Hey, jump in, let's go." That was an ad-lib moment.
Really?
It's not scripted. So the kid jumped in and they start singing that song as they drive away. That's not scripted. That's just something they came up with. It was, it's a British kids movie or kids show from the era, but they both knew it and they both went for it. And the two of them playing off each other was incredible too.
That actor, Jupe.
Yeah.
He's just amazing.
He's incredible.
Wonderful. We supported a movie that he did called Honey Boy.
Honey Boy, yeah.
He played.
It was incredible in that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, what is that?
He's a really
what can he not do?
And it was really good, and it was so much fun watching that dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, and him and the two of them just, and him and Matt Damon too. I mean, Christian Bale and Matt Damon were just going for it, and just, I mean, each one of them brought their A game every single day. It was really fun to watch. And Jim would always, throughout the day, would always make little suggestions for everybody, every actor, and make every time, every take would tweak something, make it, and it would always be better.
Yeah.
Which you never really see with every director. Some directors will tweak it, and you go, "Oh, that wasn't as great,"
really?
But Jim, every suggestion was that much better on the next take.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
You were saying earlier that he really thinks fast.
Jim is fast.
Yeah, processes information really fast, and it's quick to kind of make changes.
I mean, he's like an improv comedian, where it's like they're just how do you think that fast on that level of brain power that often? Which to me he's got to just collapse when he gets home. He's just exhausted, right? But I mean, he's always very quick at thinking, very fast at, even if it's a line change or an idea or something different or something comes up on production where, it's unplanned, which happens all the time. It's very quick to just not let it derail him. He just keeps moving forward.
Cool.
It's really fun to watch.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions that I had. Were there any other sort of fun stories from production that you wanted to relate?
I mean, not really. No, I mean, we had a good time on that movie, and that was a fun set. And it was tough. It was not an easy movie to make.
Why was it tough? What was particularly tough about this one?
I think it's just it's a big scope movie.
Yeah.
It's an epic kind of film, but we didn't have we didn't have a ton of time to shoot it. I think it was 67 days.
Oh, so it was a pretty fast shoot.
It was a fast shoot in LA. And I think everybody had their heart in it.
Yeah.
I think both the entire crew and everybody on production. I mean, the production designer built these amazing sets, that you would just think are there. But I mean, the pits are 3 stories high, 500 feet long, and they're gorgeous.
They're massive.
And it's massive. And it's like, there was nobody just phoning it in on that movie, but it was hard. It was a hard movie because it was hot every day. It was windy every day. It was dusty every day. But at the end of the day, it all paid off because the movie is
a big, complicated movie.
It's a big, complicated movie. Yeah, I mean, there's some days where you'd show up and honestly, the GT40 was blue, and historically, it's supposed to be white. And Jim would go, "Guys, it's supposed to be white." And Transpo would run down there, grab the car, and yep, it's gonna be white. And then come back 5 hours later, and there it is, white.
Wow.
You're like, I don't know how they did it,
Yeah.
because we didn't have 40 of those cars. We had to couple, and they had to go from white to blue to, to whatever it was. And so it was like, how did they do it? It's like, uh-oh.
Wow. Well, Steve, thanks for coming in again, your 3rd nomination. And hopefully we'll see you again on this show at some point.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, thanks for tuning in. This is our conversation on Ford versus Ferrari. We talked with the post-production sound team earlier, and we just finished up with Steve Morrow, who's the production sound mixer on the film. Congratulations again, and thanks for tuning in.